the market seemed to suggest that it was a plot all the way along when the conflict started. Because if you look at the potential shutdown of Hormuz and possibility of a potential nuclear escalation, incomplete, and also the potential involvement of Russia and China in Iran, and I mean that is the definition of third world war. And yet oil price barely struck above $70, and equities was staging all-time high, and gold was correct. Gold was in that trading range at 3,400, barely budged on either direction. So that was telling the market participants, the market was telegraphing that that the risk of a blown out WW3 was not in the cards.
Welcome to Discourse with Christian. I'm your host, Christian White, and today's guest is John Lee. John is the CEO of Silver Elephant Mining Corporation, based in Vancouver, British Columbia. He joins us today from Mongolia. John, thanks so much for being on the show today.
Good morning, Christian.
Would love to start off getting your current macro take on the world, what's going on geopolitically, global economy, financial markets, things of that nature.
Well, it's a very broad question, but the last 30 days is certainly not without drama. And it was a relief to see, it is a relief to see that the simmering down of the situation in the Middle East. I had come on a number of interviews prior while Iran and Israel are sort of in their state of mutual destruction. And I think it was on a Friday, 10 days ago, I was on my Twitter and said that it would have been a genius move for the president to stage this as a bit of a high school sort of a duel out and then come in to stop the process. Because Christian, the talks of getting a tussle with Iran is well advertised for more than almost 2 decades. So it is inevitable, and it has to take place. So, like I said, it's a high school yard, right? If two guys had a beef between if there's a beef between the two, it's unavoidable, and you have very well endowed people on both sides of the aisle that want to get started. And maybe it's not the ideal scenario. Unfortunately, the world is not a perfect place. Is to let them duke it out, and let the people who are eventually the arbiters to see the destruction of a war, and then put a stop to it. And that is really the best way to rally support. Interestingly, even though I don't talk much politics, there will likely be a regime change, but it's not going to be Iran. And we have to wait and see how that plays out.
Did you unpack that you said it's not going to be Iran?
Well, I mean, if you look at net, Christian, right? The destruction and the who stood there to benefit. Well, obviously the Honeywells and the guys that produced the bombers, and they stood to benefit because a few $1 billion of inventory that have to be replenished. But the loser coming out of all that is clearly Israel, and to some extent Iran. It was a prospering country that was doing very well, and under the pretense of trying to eliminate nuclear weapons. In the end, casualties incurred, and buildings were struck. And once the beacon of freedom in the Middle East, and the image is tarnished, and I cannot fathom or second guess how many people want to continue to live in Israel. So it's a very difficult situation, unfortunately. However, on the other side of the token is people seeing the damage, and it's almost like even in the U.S., who has shown its true colors in people for peace versus people versus otherwise. And I do believe that it is really the best outcome, because the war is inevitable. And so given the circumstance, there is damage. But like I said, given the circumstance, the damage inflicted is somewhat tolerable, I suppose, compared to something that could be much worse.
What are your thoughts on people having talked about it being kind of theatrics and elements of it being staged even and having been done in bad faith, this, bombing that occurred that was likened to kind of like a Pearl Harbor negotiating, things of that nature?
Mr. Trump, well, you can call it theatrics, but that I believe, well, not I believe, if you look at the oil market and the gold market and the equity market, something was missing a foot. It's either blatant extreme market manipulations, which turned out not to be the case. So the market also knew something about the market. There's always people that know about the market. So therefore, the it, the market seemed to suggest that it was a plot all the way along. When the conflict started, because if you look at the potential shutdown of Hormuz and possibility of a potential nuclear escalation, incomplete, and also the potential involvement of Russia and China in Iran, and I mean that is a definition of third world war. And yet, oil price could barely struck above $70, and equities was staging all-time high, and gold was correct. Gold was in that trading range at 3,400, barely budged on neither direction. So that was telling the market participants. The market was telling the market was telegraphing that the risk of a full out blown out WW3 was not in the cards, and the oil market was also telegraphing that a prolonged and escalating conflicts in the Middle East was not in the cards. And sure enough, you saw that final blow up. I think was on a Friday. I think it was on a Monday. That was the oil corrected 8% before Trump tweeted or whatever in his social media that it's time to end, and oil has not recovered since. So that's just telling me that at least for the next little while, that the situation is contained, and that just call it the warmongers, for lack of a better descriptive, is sort of 1 a.m, that they are in retreat at least for a while. I also want to preface, Christian, it's highly it's not even to do with politics, but if you're an investor, if you to watch what the president had, the president's speech and and what he spoke about in the Middle East, and he was very genuine. You can tell if you follow him for the last few years, that when he talked about not into nation building like Iraq and Afghanistan, and that commerce is the way to pacify the world and to make the world prosperous. And I think he really meant it. And the Iraq and Afghanistan, the wars going in there, that was never for peace. In fact, it was almost purposely chosen. Iraq is producing 4.5 million barrels a day of oil today, and that's, I believe, a top 5 oil producing nation in the world. But that was entirely controlled by the multinationals in England and the United States. Same when the same with Russia and the U.S. went to Afghanistan. Strategically important because its neighbors, China, by the same time has opium production. So I think these two countries are purposely picked on. Number one is they do have some natural resources, and number two, with its proximity to China, what they want to do is engulfing China, attacking from the east via Taiwan, and then from the west via Xinjiang and Tibet. That was the plan all along. As I said, I think that there is some relief in that the plan is going to be thwarted at least for the years to come during the Trump administration.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. The point you brought up, I think it was on the episode with Mario, how regime change in Iran, or at least being able to usurp or take over that region as a stepping stone to get closer and closer to call it the transnationalists, et cetera's agenda to going after China and such. Could you perhaps dive into that more and also where you see China headed overall, perhaps even in the next decade?
Yeah, Christian, regime change is not about democracy. If you look at Afghanistan and Iraq today, I don't think they're any better than they were before the war or before the regime was changed. And the way I look at it, these were satellite colonies, right? The assets are pillaged, and the country is. I don't think there's any rehabilitation from the economy or from democracy in that regard. And it just the state is keeping it dilapidated. I mean, the countries are keeping it dilapidated state where the people are just fed enough before the revolt, and the while the natural resources were extracted and for the benefits of the bankers elsewhere. Now, uh, as I mentioned in Mario's show, the relationship with China and the United States is very intricate. Same with the China's relationship with the rest of the world. I mean, you were looking at China was doing very well with the 5,000-year history. I'm from Taiwan, so I'm ethnically Chinese. If you read the history, China was minding its own business until until the British came, right? And the country was carved out amongst the Japanese, the Russians, and the British in Macau, in Hong Kong, and Portuguese. So, I mean, it suffered hundreds of years, 100 years plus of humiliation and shame in the Chinese history. But nonetheless, it hasn't really, it didn't really do, it hasn't instigated any war or any conflicts outside of South China Sea, of which there's some territorial disputes based on historical context. So I'm not going to get into that. Uh, United States is the supreme superpower of the world, both militarily and economically. It doesn't matter sort of how the rule-based economy goes when you're bullying and you're benefiting from the status from where your status, and you want to keep the status quo. It's understandable. And in order to continue to exert global dominance, both militarily, economically, especially with the much added benefit of printing your currency as the world's reserve currency, it is prudent and it can only be seen as a doctrine to try to keep that as status quo. And given the Chinese economy with officially 4 times the population, 3 times the population, and an economy already grow to about a third of America's economy, which went from almost non-existent on the top league table, is to understand that the United States is concerned. Obviously there are different camps within the U.S. as to how they should tackle the situation of the rising China. So I already laid out my positions of the transnationals in how they view China, which is not to contain, but to force a regime change again, like what they tried to do with Putin a number of times, and tried with USSR and Russia with the Gorbachev and the Boris Yeltsin before Putin came along. So it's always the regime change and try to control, and it's not really to do economically for the transnationals. I don't want to. I want to actually distinguish, and let me sort of, my thoughts are a little bit unorganized. There is a very distinction between the interests of the United States versus the interest of what I call the transnationals. They were leeching on to UK up to about 200 years, before the inception of the United States, and now they have switched their legions or switched their home base, which is somewhat parasitic to the U.S. And it's taken them almost 100 years, 150. Well, it's taken them, since the founding fathers, since the inception of the United States, it's taken them 200 years to get to where they are from slowly erosion of the freedom and also the monetary system since 1913. That's when since 1913 and 1917, the gold standards, that's really the printing press gets started. And they do have one of those printing press. That's why you see the Vanguards and the BlackRocks, and probably 5% of the people own 90% of the U.S. market today. So I think there is a different agenda between the U.S. and the transnationals. So when I'm talking about transnationals' goal is to force regime change. And the reason they do that is not entirely profit seeking because they already control 95% of the wealth on Earth. It is a world domination, kind of like Christian, when you were born, you say, I want to be a novelist, or I want to be Olympic gymnastics, or I want to be a astrophysicist. Their goal is world domination, right? Their goal is to have a total submission of everybody in the world and have a one world government, and kind of like the emperor. And it's just their goal. But obviously, that goal is not aligned with the U.S. depending on the administration, but certainly not aligned with the American people. And so therefore, that you see that divide clearly now. With you see the Tucker Carlson interview with Ted Cruz, and you see the Lindsey Grahams, you even see the Vice President Pence. You can even go far as Daniel Flynn, who's somebody I should watch closely, but they were all proponents of this and Mike Huckabee. I think from this exercise, you can clearly see the interests of certain Americans that are really more aligned with the transnationals versus the goal of versus sort of what the U.S. interests are. And maybe they're a little bit misguided or too gullible, or maybe they were well indoctrinated and are core insiders of the transnationals and the WEF. We don't know, but neither way, the outcome was the same. I think they were supporting a cause that was at a detriment of U.S. And if you look at, you got over 10 million undocumented immigrants. It's not unfathomable to see potential devastating consequences of if the war to be prolonged, of what could happen within the motherland of the United States. I just want to sort of expand a minute more on what my take on China is. I don't think anybody can speak for China. It's a big world, and even within China, there are different factions of within China that are very divided. Just like the United States, there's Democrats and Republican, but even with the Republican, there's pro-war and anti-war. And this is the same. It's the same in China. I think majority of the China people are for peace, but you're talking politicians, and they have different views on how they would work within the U.S. and sort of how they view of the world. Well, not the previous. Right now, the current sitting president Xi Jinping is a lot more hardline and more Marxist and communism akin to Putin. But there has been some very important events that have taken place in the last 2 years. It seems which seem like the Xi Jinping has lost majority, if not all, of the power, and he's on his way down. And there's going to be a new regime that's coming on to the scene in China, and we can talk about that. But I do believe that's better. Is it better than? Well, I'm not going to say it's better or worse than we're getting in politics, but it will be a departure from the view of President Xi with this new incumbents coming on in that transition of power.
Unpack who that new potential group that might take over Xi's current role.
Talk more about it. Yeah.
Yes.
In my view, Xi's tenure was on path of decimating the Communist Party, because when you are in a socialist country or even a communist country, you have to make decisions based on consensus. And I think Xi just made too many enemies, and he's going back to the Mao Zedong era, and in fact, even probably potentially worse. And he sent people to concentration camps, and he's trying to create famine and commune. I mean, it was a little scary watching how China people have suffered in the last 10 years. I go to China quite frequently. I'm a Taiwanese. And a lot of the people disappeared. Around 10% of the Communist Party was purged. And a lot of the top-ranking Chinese people were exiled to Singapore, in Japan, of all places. And I think it was gone too far. Let me go back to saying again, in the communist world, there are some people that were gullible and sort of play along so long they can sort of put food on the table. But there are some people that really genuinely believe in common suffering, in ideals of Marxists. So Xi Jinping, unfortunately, is one of those. And you see the decimation of the economies in China, in Hong Kong, where people are hungry and starving, and just to achieve an ideal of common suffering. And unfortunately, she had reportedly a health episode, and that's not quite well documented in one of the most important Politburo meeting, and of which then there are some members of the within the party that seized power from that meeting. And interestingly, that just when she thought that he managed to continue his third term, and he thought he had everything in the world. He has a total control and total he has a total grip of the power in China, and that was the start of his downfall, and that was very precipitous. The new guys come in are the factions that are more technocrats, more pragmatic, the Jiang Zemin and Hu Jintao people. So I think their number one mandate is to de-escalate between the war, between sort of a de facto conflict already, to improve the Sino-American relationship. They were taken back a bit looking at what Israel did to Iran, and I think they were very relieved inside that it was a theatrical act, like you said, rather than, well, I wouldn't say it's theatrical because people died. It's not like there was no damage. I would say it's a plot to satisfy the warmongers in order to achieve peace. Because, like I said, the game is being planned for so long. You have to let the steam out before things can be patched up. I think the Chinese and Koreans and Japanese, they actually avoided or the meeting with the UN to meet Trump, and because they were still in the midst of trying to understand the geopolitics. They're probably not as well versed. But I think when it comes to shop, when they understood sort of really all the different forces at stake in the U.S. and the struggles between the transnationals in the U.S. and elsewhere, they will come away quite impressed, I believe, in my view, of what at least that is a path of the best solution given the circumstances. Um, I also want to try my thought briefly on where I see United States, because I was in Canada. Our company is based in Canada. Vancouver is totally in shambles, and it's very sad to see what's happening in Canada. And unfortunately, the U.S. is well on path of that. If the previous administration were to sort of continue their path, I'm not saying the Republicans are better, but just when you thought that you are on top of the world, and that is when you have nowhere else to go. And I'm finger crossed that the U.S. is not embarking that path, and that with the current sitting administration, they can salvage and find a way to prosper. It's going to be a very challenging act, but I'm hopefully optimistic that, and I'm in agreement that trade is the way to prosper, because trade is the common language that could be spoken amongst cultures, religions, genders, and everything. That is the common language of people can communicate. Not religion, right? Certainly not race and not politics, and that through trade, we can take the world to a better place than we are now, Christian.
I was going to answer you real quick because you brought up, obviously Canada, and I know there's been kind of a schism going on, and I'm, for the viewers that don't know, I'm based in California, but do you see kind of a break off within Canada? Just out of curiosity, what's kind of the sentiment in your take?
Christian, I actually worked my first 5 years of my career. I was in Silicon Valley, and I was just in Los Angeles right before COVID. Oh my God, it's horrible. And It's horrible. You're walking downtown street of California, it's like you're in a scary ghost, like those movies, right? The zombie movies. And I was in Santa Monica, and that was not the Santa Monica that I knew when I was a student, summer intern at UCLA, and that was 20 years ago, 30 years ago. Actually, not. It's over 32 years ago. So things have really gotten a lot worse over the years. Canada is going on, is embarking the same path, and it's no surprise that Trudeau and Newsom were almost like they're buddies. They speak the same language. As you know, Christian, you like if you're gonna install a furnace in California, you have to make sure that the furnace within specs, so they're gonna tell you how you're gonna heat your home. Meanwhile, the homeless are wreaking havoc in the street. Unfortunately, the federal election turned out to be turned out to the federal election. The Liberals continued their reign through this recent election in Canada, and same with the British Columbia. The NDP was elected there. Not a single person I talked to voted for them, so I don't know what's going on there. I will leave it at that. I think Trump had stay quiet for a few years until he came out of the woodworks and got reelected. And he just continued his mantra that the election in 2020 was rigged. And I think there is a potential support in that there are more votes cast than there are people that are eligible for voting or registered to vote. I think the similar thing could be at play in Canada, because I don't know a single person that actually voted for Democrats in the federal election and voted for NTP. No, I digress. It's a politics. It's a zero sum game. It's very unfortunate situation in Canada, and we just have to work with what we're given, Christian.
Yeah, I know there's been talk of, Carney being part of the transnationalists overseas. If you could just kind of briefly kind of unpack that, like how do you define those? Some have said it's people behind the Bank of England, the BIS, or Davos. I don't know if you care to unpack that more.
Right. My understanding is Mr. Carney doesn't even live in Canada, has multiple passports. I don't know how you can be a president holding more than one passport. And this is just the basics. In terms of monetary policies, the International Bank of Settlement, if you do read about it, they are already rolling out, or they're bringing the CBDC, short central bank digital currency, um, beyond infancy stage, is at the deployment stage, and they have a new protocol called the M-Bridge, M-Bridge, and that is putting into place for real life transactions, which is a protocol and currency issued by BIS. This BIS, Christian, is a layer on top of all the national fiats. And there was actually before talk of BIS currency, a currency that's issued by the BIS, and that will be a basket of international currencies. So what I mean by that is that different countries like Japan and UK and Euro and United States will have to remit every year. It's like a patron to a certain amount of money to the BIS, of which BIS can issue their own currencies interchangeable for the basket of these currency that they receive from these nationals. We are entering into a world of CBDC. It might sound interesting. It might sound. I mean, it's the marketing message is you can transact more easily without friction, and we're in a digital era, so you can get digital currency. Well, the problem is a digital currency comes with liabilities. Once you have a digital wallet, you lose anonymity. You may be mandated to shop wherever. You may be dictated on where you shop, how much you shop, and what you shop. And that is a bit of scary thought. And there's even the ideas of getting rid of the currencies whatsoever, money whatsoever, and giving you carbon credits instead. So these credits would expire at the end of the year. they cannot be saved, and they're not a form of wealth. And it's Christian, it's you're going back to becoming supermarket coupons. And interestingly, during the COVID era, Taiwan had issued you vouchers that looked like real money. Well, it's not the money; it's actually real in the first place. Real fiat bills, but in the end, it tells you expires when, and will tell you sometimes where you can buy like food or clothes. You can see down the path that we're leading, and which is the 2030 agenda of own nothing and be happy. And that is, so when you talk about the BIS, it is actually a safety net or a convenience um, uh, scheme for the transnationals to exert control. Because I mean, they're already printing. I mean, the countries like UK and Europe, and to a large extent the US, are already subordinated to these transnationals. So, Elon Musk talked about he discovered 14 printers, one sitting at Department of Defense, one sitting on the U.S. Treasury. I mean, that's akin to a company like Silver Elephant have different departments that can just issue Silver Elephant shares at will. And you'd be curious to ask, like, who control these printers? Who designed the software? How is that audited? How are these different machines, marshal together or match together in printing? And unfortunately, the transnationals have these printers already, and that's my view. And the BIS just an additional layer of safeguard for these people. And we're on path going into a one world government. In fact, we are already half our way through. It's not gonna be a multipolar world. It's gonna be one world, and the only two standing, not oppositions, but they're the only really two standing people that are not part of this. They want to play this game is Russia and China. Where the U.S. is headed is to be seen, and I'm really hopeful, and I'm optimistic that the American people will wake up and say, "Look, we're Americans. We're looking after American interests." My sister is American, and I was educated in the U.S., and there's really no better place to be. You're the only place where you can defend yourself, and you can speak freely, and you can pursue happiness, and you can go places where you want to go. And it'll be a good status quo to keep it at that.
Obviously, you're an international man. You do a fair amount of traveling. What's kind of been the general overall consensus amongst the internationals that you interact with, that perhaps West is in decline, we're in kind of a WW3, if you will, and that we're in this multipolar world, so to speak? Is there a difference of opinion you're finding?
Again, it's a very broad question, Christian. Most of the people I traveled around 15 countries in the last 18 months since early 2024. The world economy is not in a good place, even though you have the equity markets that are approaching all-time high. Goes to I was saying, you now have probably 5% of the people that own 90% of the wealth in the world, and but the world is not the world economy is not in a good place. I was in Taiwan, I was in Korea, I was in Southeast Asia, I was in Mongolia, I was in Japan, I was in Canada, and the living standards are being eroded. The prices are high, but people's salaries are not catching up to inflation, and so the purchasing power and just living standards are going the opposite direction of where they should go. Um, People are busy trying to put food on the table, and I think most of the people are, regardless of religious, and politics and whatever you believe, that most people are just trying to make peace, and they like to travel, and put food on the table. It'll be interesting, Christian, too, that most of the world, I would say probably half of the world, half the adults I see, they're not interested in politics. And I would just recommend your audience, like, put aside the day to day. Oh, the world's going to come to an end, and then this, black and white and shades of gray, who's right or who's wrong. There's really, um, I want to go back to Mario, my interview with Mario in Monaco 64. I read the book Conversations with God. I'm an atheist. I came up with it from the Buddhist family. So I'm the furthest away. I haven't read a page of Bible in my life. But I do believe that we're created by the infinite intelligence. There's somebody out there that created everything. It's a simulation. And I want to expand further a bit. It's very important. Now it's sort of tying into your question. You're here to experience, to accumulate wealth through experience. So the infinite intelligence, which possess all the knowledge that's ever there, but they're living in the world of absolute, not relative. So what I mean by that is the guy or he or she or whatever or it has the knowledge of how to drive, but he cannot drive. So he has to create us in order for him to feel, to experience the feeling of driving or the feeling of eating, right? Or the feeling of hurt or vulnerability or the feeling of freedom or the feeling of betrayal. So it's not even like, well, at least I don't subscribe to that. We should do good or bad. If we do bad, we have to beg for prayer. We're going to heaven. We go to all. I don't think there's right or wrong, but it's just a matter of the path that you carve out for yourself. Obviously, if you do a lot of bad things in your definition, you're going to attract the likes attract, right? So you're gonna have bad things happen to you just because your karma is aligning with that camp. And but it's not like you're gonna do something and the universe is gonna cause retribution to you. I think most of the people do that, so they're not really much into religious and the absolutes because they realize it's not really adding anything to their experience in the world. They might try for a little bit. They're like, you know what, this is not working out for me. Like it's nothing but grievance and aggravations and it's not really doing anything. So I think most of the people they're just you're gonna see like every now and then in a taxi driver in Taipei that was just like angry about politics, right? Same with Korea, you have people that are marching on the street. But a lot of times, a lot of like the Twitter and the news, they're sensationalizing what's happening in the world because they get nothing better. Like you're not gonna report the sun is shining and the flowers are blooming. People are happy. They're not gonna get your audience for that. So we're in the stage of awakening, in my view, and people are gradually sort of waking up to that the world is a great place, and there's so many things to do, so many places to travel, so many different food to try. I mean, since I talked to Mario and trying pad thai for the first time, I started eating coleslaws. I used to think coleslaw is like, oh, my God, that sticky thing with white and chopped stuff is like the most unhealthy thing in the world and the worst looking thing. I'm eating coleslaw from KFC. Was like, well, yeah, having been KFC for like 20 years, it's, oh, that's a KFC. I'm thinking, wow, let's go and try that. So I'll just say that I don't think people are uh, playing identity politics or any ideological possessions amongst them, except more than majority of the people are not. So I don't think they have any particular stance in pro-war, anti-war, aligning the West or whatnot. But they like to travel. They like to interact with the U.S. They like to go to San Francisco if they are given a chance and just see the world as they are. I want to also share, Christian, one more thing with you. Well, actually, two more things. When we're created, mankind, thousands of years ago, again, that's up to debate of how the world is created and how men are created. I don't think it's coming from monkeys. Uh, I mean, and with this another conversation, but we're here. Like, imagine when the mankind was first created, right? You can roam wherever you like. You can do it, eat, and you can just run around and do nothing and enjoy the day and hunt it when you're hungry and you just enjoy the world. And all of a sudden, I think it's going to the philosophy, Christian, of socialism versus capitalism. I used to be the camp of um, Austrian economics, libertarian. That is the best way to the world. You possess your own rights and you defend it, and everybody's capitalism the way to the world. I'm not having second thought about it because if you think about it, capitalism is really the cause of all the wars because you infringe on my property, I defend it, I go into war with you, right? So there is a consequence to this ideology. And if you think back in the world when they get started, there's no rights, there's no property rights, and people they're roaming, and I think they did okay. They're certainly happier than where we are now. And then if you look at I was watching the movie, the Blue Lagoon, right? Like they didn't even want to get on the ship when there's a ship that sailed because they're quite happy with their status quo and then explore sort of what the nature had to offer. And so in the end, there's a certain amount of people that are bought into the narratives, and the way that the communism exploit is through division, and the rich, the poor, the white, the black, and whatnot. Right? That's how they divide, and when there's division, then they can exert power. So I think in the end, we're one of the world. We share the same, like we come from the same place, and when we leave, we go back to the mothership. It's just really not a lot to argue about. And I do believe maybe in 100 years or 200 years or 300 years from now, and Christian, I haven't really shared with anybody because this is new, is you're gonna get into a state collectively in this world. And maybe that's when the 2% of the world, the transnational, own 99% of the assets. And then they maybe will come to this epiphany. Now they have owned everything. And then maybe that's the end of their agenda, and they will just let everything free. That is kind of the scenario actually I see that we're embarking on, because there's not going to be an end of the world, because it's just collective conscience would not lead us into that place. And so in the end, it's a philosophy, and the capitalism is it's a transitory solution to the world. And eventually, maybe 300 or 500 or 1,000 years from now, you're going to go back to the state of everybody owns everything, because the world has so much wealth. There's technology for unlimited energy, unlimited food. There's certainly enough land for 10 times the population that we are to live. And if you look at Mongolia, for example, you can have, even the United States, you can have 5 times the population in the United States. There's still enough places to live. I think the fear, and it's the fear of people, again, they're being stoked by the transnationals to try to, and that's when you have fear, right? Then you do things beyond sort of what you beyond your call of duty, and it's unfortunate where we are, but I do think people are waking up. It's a very long-winded answer to a question about what do other people think of other people. In the end, I don't think that there is difference in other people into liking or attacking other people. Majority of the people are just quite happy going on their own way, trying to make sure that they put food on the table. Christian.
You mentioned energy, and I have to ask you, I might be deviating here for a moment, but what are your thoughts on that, of free energy, or things of that nature already in existence, that having been known perhaps since like Tesla's time, and that it's been suppressed more or less? I'm kind of agnostic on it, but I've heard different sides of it. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yes, Christian, I do. We are, I believe, in 50 years going into an absolute renaissance of world peace and technological breakthroughs. Um, Let me share with you an extremely interesting insight I maybe not heard from anybody. And this is not some conspiracy theory I don't believe at all. Uh, the pyramid, there's not just pyramids in Egypt, there's also pyramids in Mexico and elsewhere, and Peru, of similar structures. They are created they're created not by Egyptians. Okay. It's just not. I think it would be way too naive. I think these these are devices created to harness uh, synthetic earthquakes to generate energy. So what I mean by that is a pyramid has a structure of which they will detonate. They will detonate, and they will use vibration to create energy. If you think about it, Christian, you've seen some bridges, right? When the frequency, and then the vibration of the vibration of the pyramid that's created by a very minor. I'm not talking about nuclear bomb. Like it is to create frequency that matches the proton coming from and the sound coming from from Earth, of which they're channels. from the top of the pyramid to create that reaction of which the energy is created. And and then also if you look at the energy, like when the energy matches, right? Even in Thailand, you have all bridges, you have these vibration. My point is the world energy is absolutely unlimited, even solar. So I mean that's the first, like just if we can harness vibration and the earth is rotating constantly. So that in itself is, and you can think about why what is energy causing the world earth to be rotating? Where does the energy come from for the sun to be shining and create so much heat and energy? It's all part of the simulation, the game that's created by the boss. And there is absolute unlimited on energy. Even if you look at an atom has electrons that's orbiting among of the nucleus. So there's tremendous of energy to be harnessed, and we're only at the very infancy of that discovery, because our knowledge is approaching that was given to us. There's a very long analogy I will store. I can tell you why we're embarking on such exponential rise of our knowledge, right? If you look at monkeys 200 years ago versus monkey today, they're still a monkey. But if you look at human 50 years ago versus the we are today, it's a huge difference. And the reason I can share with you is because we're married we're a product of monkeys and aliens. And these aliens have lived their civilization millions of years earlier than us. So part of our DNA coming from the alien is reflecting that. And that's why we're going exponential in our knowledge. But all this energy is going to be harnessed. So it's aliens that build a pyramid to harness the vibration of the earth to create energy. But even absent of that, there's the solar energy, which is not as ideal as the pyramid, because pyramid has no residuals. But the solar panels are a waste that has to be recycled. But Elon Musk talked about if you put there's enough space in Utah, a 10 square miles can put enough solar panels to generate the power input of what's being needed in the entire United States. So there are so many ways to generate energy. Now, fossil fuel is one, but we're entering rapidly into a world where energy is abundant and unlimited. And if you look at the budget, right, majority of the budget or half of our budget is spent on creating energy and heat just to make a living. But all of that is going to be the efforts of energy creation is obsolete. So there's a lot. And then if you think of artificial intelligence, again, humans going to be relieved from doing the things that we don't have to do, like the mundane things, right? Wow. Like my mom was telling me that 50 years ago when she was a child and her uncle has to go and climb the mountain for a day to collect some apples to bring down to sell. And then if you look at the Silk Roads, right, people have to travel hundreds of miles to collect salt to be sold, or pearls. And now there's artificial pearls, and there's artificial diamond. And so nanotechnology, maybe in 50 years time, can create anything you want, including possibly gold. And then there's already technology, and people talk about aging as being a disease that could be cured. I'm actually also falling in the camp, because a little bit crazy, Christian. I'm happy to share with you. That's okay. But aliens are living thousands of years. And the reason humans live only 100 years on average is it was a clock that was being put in our DNA that was going to expire in 100 years. But there are people already figuring out what part of the DNA is causing that. And they're finding ways to mitigating that, either through medicine or through different ways. So, and there's also history before. I was told in the Bible, I don't know how to read the Bible, but they're humans, or they're documents that have lived 200 years or 300 years or taller or shorter than us, because we're an experiment by the guys that came to us, from outer space. And so I wouldn't be surprised in 50 years we discover how we can live. Just one last evidence I want to share with the Christian is the technology already exists. I can take a strand of hair, Christian, and I can replicate you. So if the knowledge, right, and if the formula exists in your body for you to live forever or to clone yourself. So why would there be knowledge for you to continue to live as you are? So we're entering multifaceted, fascinating world of knowledge. The last thing I want to maybe share with your audience is there's always the camp of doom and gloom, like the world is going to go to starving and the market's going to crash and you're going to be restricted your movement, like the macro mandates that we talk about. I'm becoming more optimistic by the day and not more pessimistic. Regardless of your big picture view of the world, there is still plenty for you to do. I mean, there are, if you watch some channels, there are people, there's a girl that's hitchhiking from China to Cape Town in South Africa. She doesn't. She's having fun, and you have people that's walking from London to Vietnam, and they're on day 350 halfway through on a shoestring budget. And you have people that are biking from Pakistan to Mongolia on a bike. And there are a lot more things to do and see and feel and experience. And even in the end, imagine say Jeff Bezos has got 5, 10, 50 billion dollars. I mean, once you kick the bucket, you donate your money to a museum or school. I mean, who really cares, right? After a generation or two of how much money you achieved or how much money you donated, or even how much contribution you made to the world. Even Elon Musk, like who's going to remember Elon Musk 200 years from now outside what you read from the textbook? So that's what the world we live in.
I oh boy, you covered so much. I guess for starters, I'll start off with as I have been on this journey of kind of I started last year learning about sound money and never, a lot of people don't. Your average Joe walking down the street, and then it's funny how that ties in with liberty, and understanding politics, understanding how the world works, how it's so interconnected. I heard the silver guru, David Morgan.
Oh,
He
he's my
mentioned a
best friend. We
documentary.
just met him a week ago. Yeah.
Yeah, he mentioned about the documentary Thrive, and I was kind of intrigued. So I was like, oh, I'm gonna go look this up, and I was really moved by the documentary. I thought it was pretty fascinating, and it seems it's so funny too. You brought up aliens, something that was taboo, 10 plus years ago or what have you, has now entered more of the mainstream consciousness, and other things that whether it's 9/11, they had that gentleman on Tucker. I don't know if you saw it, just all these little things that were outlandish, you face ridicule, are now becoming more mainstream. I think it's fascinating. And to your point, despite the doom and gloom and thumbnails you see on YouTube and other things, as a big history guys, you can kind of see behind me. I think we do live in the best time today. Even yeah, sure, there's decline in society and culture, and you've got issues. You don't have the level of rampant rape and pillaging that occurred throughout parts of Europe, Asia, Africa over the past several millennia. People dying from diseases or high infant mortality rates.
Yes.
Yeah, sure, things could be improved, but overall, people have a pretty good setup. We're having a conversation. You're in Mongolia right now. I'm in Central California. That's pretty amazing right there, and access to resources. Obviously, still a lot more work to be done. So yeah, it's absolutely fascinating, fascinating times.
It used to be maybe not even 100 years ago, you have to work all day, entire day, just to put a food on the table. And now you would go online within 15 seconds and you can get a flight for, I don't know, $1,000, which is a complete abstract thing. And then you can get on a plane, you can fly to the end of the world, anywhere you want to go. Can you just imagine, like, if the world is not where we are, what would it take for you to go to the farthest end from the world? Like, say you're in California, you want to go to Cape Town, Africa, or I think if you call it, but the furthest place you would go is probably so California. You would go around, yeah, like Japan, for example, right? Or from California to Vladivostok in Russia is probably as far as you would go. So for 1,000 measly dollars, which is a week of his salary, sitting on a desk for 7 hours a day, daydreaming half of that time, you can go the furthest end from where you are today. And if say you try to do that 100 years ago, what would it take? Like it's You can, or even dial back a bit, say 500 years ago, like a person in their lifetime will not probably step out from 500 kilometers from where you live. So we're living in an incredible world, and it used to be. And think about the interaction with humans. It used to be maybe 1,000 years ago. Well, actually, now was not that bad because Chinese say 3,000 years ago, the infancy of humans, or 1 or 5,000 years ago, in terms of time, is it's a blip in this on the timer. That the most people number of people is maybe 1,000 in your village, and now you can go and see anybody you want, and hear, experience languages and food, and just absolute incredible world. And Christian, like another example, today I live in Mongolia. I used to go just one way to the area I go to eat and read, and it's just in that path, right? That's like the only path I go. But today I take on a totally different path that I've never been in the last, 10 years since I stepped from in Mongolia, even though it's my backyard. It just shows you how silly we are in being fixated in that routine that we have been we have been that we have been that we have been that we have been arbitrarily pigeonholing ourselves in. And one more thing I want to share with you is, remember, we like not remember, but everybody talk about, oh, you're here to learn, you're here to you're here to go to school, you're here to do this, go to school, go to learn this and learn that, invent this, create that, right? Not really, Christian. Like, okay, you created a car, right? It's just an experience. It's not the knowledge. We're here not to create. We're here not to learn. We're here to experience and create. So so you can be perfectly happy not to have invented anything, but just you can just travel and eat. I mean, and interact. The knowledge is absolute. Sometimes I just want to caution you, don't want to go to the extreme of trying to become the creator, because it's not the knowledge. Like, God has all the knowledge he wants, right? But it's always in an eternal state of bliss. But that's not the objective. The objective for us to hear is to experience. There is a difference in sitting at a desk to learn these knowledge, right, of how it works and why that works. But then we're sort of defeat our purpose. We're here to experience. It's not to learn. There's a big difference there. Maybe a little bit subtle, but there is a difference, Christian.
Yeah, and I also wanted to add, as it relates to the times that we live in and things just in general, just an observation that I've had is there is something to be said, and not to deviate too much from this, about some correlation between having enough downtime during the day or during the week to just ideate and not have your cognitive bandwidth tied up in survival mode, which I feel so many people are in, as it relates to, and not that I've made it all by any
Yes.
means in life. I'm on the journey, but there's something to be said how I think so many Americans, or people in general, not just Americans around the world, they're so, you're mired by social or familial obligations, understandably so. Narratives pushed on people. You're working X amount, you just want to come up for air on the weekends and then hold your breath, go back under. There's no time to ideate and to think about things. Like a lot of the ideas that I've come across over the past year has been because I've been quite fortunate, and then I have a little bit more margin during the week than your average Joe. And so I'm able to explore and think about things and put on a show. So there's something to be said. And I suspect that AI, or at least hopefully, if people work less and such, they're able to come up with ideas. I know, like Sir Isaac Newton, for example, I guess during the fire or plague, he was relegated to being on lockdown at his house, and that's how he came up with ideas. Or Einstein, at his, I think he was working at a patent office. He had some boring job. He was able to come up with his groundbreaking ideas, not or Socrates or what have you, because they weren't focused on survival. They were patronized, or they had that time. So there's something to be said for that. And I think with technology, it might augment more of that with
Well,
people.
it's not even technology. It's not even technology. What's unfortunate, we're in a world where if we earn, we have to pay tax. That's kind of understandable, okay. But if we spend, we have to pay sales tax. I think that is a little bit out there. But now we're at the point where if we live, we have to pay tax, meaning that the shelter, right? The guy was complaining that he was inherited a plot of land that in the middle of nowhere, he built a home, and now you have to pay tax for the home that he created. So it's not normal that we have to pay to live. Unfortunately, that's part of the Western world. Like in Canada, I have to pay tax for my home. I have to pay energy. I have to pay crazy amount of money, condo fees, association fees. You cannot live in Canada, even if you own everything. You cannot live in Canada for less than like $3,000 a month. Honestly, it's unfortunate, but there's the point I'm Christian. I gotta say, John, you cannot like people. There's everybody's living in fear of not able to eat. There's so much to eat. There's so much food, but in the end, it's like, you know what? It's all very nice to say, but I have nothing. I still got food on the table. I think we just it's an interesting observation that I think when you have the mindset of the world being abundant, yes, absolutely. Like, granted that we still have to make a living, right? You have to like the food doesn't magically appear because you think it's appear. It's still physical constraints in how this world is formulated. But if you're coming from the world of abundance and resourceful, then things are going to come easier for you. It's just the law. It's just the law of the nature. But if you're coming from the world of fear, the coming from world of lackey, and the world of despise, the world of jealousy because somebody else has it, I don't have, and something's wrong. You're gonna spiral yourself into that bliss of which you're gonna have, but which is very easy to dig yourself out of because you are what you think. Because in the end, everything is thoughts, and it's the thoughts that creates everything. Everything else is really illusion. But besides that, there is some physical constraints that we live in because that's the world that's been created for us. But if you just experience and having the thoughts of abundance and resourceful, it will make a difference. Even though you still have to earn this abstract currency to pay for yourself, but there's already enough, way more than enough food to feed everybody. Unfortunately, it's not in the interest of the people that are in charge, and I think they're losing grip and the people that are in charge today are the same that was in charge thousands of years ago, and but they're losing grip, so that's good to hear. And then I think there is also a big migration of the Western civilization to Asia and elsewhere because they're just sick and tired of these mandates that's been placed on them. Right? You cannot do this, you cannot do that. These are the rules. You know the Karens, Christian. And then once you get out of that cycle, people just felt being so liberated. All the different rules. You have to go this, you walk this side, say that side, you cannot do this and do that. I mean, I remember this British guy that traveled walking from London to Vietnam. He said, once I got out of the UK, I just felt liberated. Like he was able to walk at the middle of a train track, right? Well, you got killed, so what? You made your life choice. But I want to be told, like, when it's red is I cannot go. When it's green, I can go. If I see train tracks, I must stay away from it. Or if I see this guy, I must bow. If it's that guy, I must like walk away. It's just all very abstract.
You mentioned about power, and it's the same group of people over the past few millennia. Could you unpack that for the audience?
Interesting. I mean, when you say power, I for a minute I thought about oil, as I want to share a bit of thought with you. America doesn't have a lot of trains like Europe because oil was discovered and it was controlled by the transnationals, and that's why they insisted you building roads so you can find oil. Christian, the sole purpose of oil before the invention of automobiles in the early 1900s was only used for lights, right? For oil, for burning, for lights. But then when electricity was created, people was like, "Oh my God, oil is made redundant. There's no use for oil anymore." Then that's how the automobile is created. The automobile is created with internal combustion engines. There's a new use for oil, and the oil is controlled by the field, by the Exxons and whatnot. So it was the whole infrastructure scheme of the United States that's road based. It was just create demand for oil rather than for train. It's just a food for thought. And but now you talk about power. Um, it's Moore's law. 20% of the people control 80% of the wealth. And I'm not a sort of astute student history, but if you look at, I don't want to name names. There are a few select people in the beginning of time. I mean, they rule Africa, they rule South America, the dynasty of UK. And these are the same people. They are born from somewhere. They're not Jewish either. And my brother-in-law is Jewish. I have nothing against them. They're not Jewish. So I can only say Christian. You can go back and read some books about it. But I mean, there are some information out there. There some of it being muffled, but you have some people. They're not. That are even maybe transhuman, because maybe they're closer to the guys that sort of experiment on us, so they get an early leg up in that, and they made out a lot of rules, including ownerships and titles. If you look at title, right, your home title, like who started that in the first place? Because when we're created, there's no such thing as who owns what. There's not even language. So somebody somehow created that and have a leg up in I mean, whoever creates it, right, gets in the first. It's kind of Christian, kind of like my sister told me, if you create a startup is like what Earth was when human was born. A startup, the first one is the owner, and the second one is the employee. So they were the owner. but because of the expansion of the world, like we made, also to remember the early part of the world, there's only a few places that are habitable. And that's why the transnationalists are, you know what, the world is becoming so modernized. There's so many areas I want to rule, I want to conquer, whereas before I don't give a shit about it. But now they want piece of that, not because they don't have enough, but because they just felt like anything of meaning, anything of substance, they want to be ownership of that. So that's what they're accustomed to. And that's what they always have from the start of time. And they're the owner and everybody else was slave, and they just want to keep that status quo. It's not easy to do, and that's why some people speculated that the timing of the events is they're getting more hurried because they felt like they're losing grip. And that's why they felt like they need to get moving quicker sooner than later. I mean, for example, did you know that Russia creates more arms, artilleries, and weapons in 3 months than all of the world, UN, and even United States combined? So they felt like their clock is running out and that they want to get to their end game, right? Which is own nothing and be happy 2030 and one world government. They felt like they're losing grip. And that's why they're trying to speed up. And these powers are the same few people that may be named in the hundreds, but they're not a lot. They're the descendants and heirs of guys that control the Vaticans, they control entire Europe, control UK, and to a large extent US. You see the war, and but they're not having a total grip of the South America. If you see Cuba, you see Venezuela, in parts of Bolivia. So I mean, that was not an area that was envy for, so they didn't really care too much about it. Same with Russia, you know, it's a tundra, right? There's like this thing there, that thing there. But these areas of the world also have advanced so much that the transnationals are now, you know what? It is worth looking at, worth paying a visit, worth to have people kowtow, worth to have people that they want to be kowtow to.
Absolutely fascinating. I mean, we could go for hours and hours, but want to be mindful of your time. Um, John, if you could, I guess, in kind of a nutshell, kind of tell us about your company, what you're working on, and perhaps where you're seeing silver go.
Yeah, let me give a 3 minute plug. I mean, your audience is not about looking for investment ideas. Maybe some are. I mentioned on several shows, of which you can just Google John Lee Silver Elephant. Silver is going into a once in at least a decade opportunity. Last time silver was $50 was in 1980. And then the next time silver went to $50. So the first time silver was $50 was 1980. It took 33 years for silver to be going to $50 again. That was 2013 after the financial crisis. And now from 2013 to 2025, which is 13 years later, we're going to see $50 of silver again. And so that is a condemnation of COVID and this multipolar world and overprinting of the fiat. So silver has been bottled up for so long that is going to go to $50 again. We are at today of yesterday at $35, and that is an absolute critical resistance level, which I believe is being overcome. Went to as high as 37. But at 35, there is a futures role. There's a lot of technicalities involved. I don't want to expand it too much. But if we're seeing silver above $35 by early July, you're going to see silver ramping up to $50, maybe potentially 100. The reason is silver is money. And silver, the metal in itself, is being picked on, even though itself doesn't play a significance in the world arena in its usage and whatnot, even though it's a critical metal, I got it. But it's being picked on. It's almost like a proxy. It's like Ukraine, right? A proxy between Russia and China. And it was going to be Iran as well, but I'm glad that's being salvaged. So it's in order for the world to continue to print and for the transnational continue to enlist, recruit their cronies, right? Their people to do their deeds. They have to make sure the dollar or whatever fiat continue. So they have to put a lid on the silver and gold, which is real money. And now the lid is being packed on the suitcase for so long, the zipper is going to be untied with in terms of liquidity. I mean, silver is very undervalued in my view by at least 3 times. Silver at gold at 3,000, oil at say even 60, silver should be at around $50 at the minimum. And if you miss this window of 50, when silver go to 50, you have to wait until first time is 35 years, second time is 13 years. If you draw the circles, the next time will be at least 6 to 7 years from now to see that another uptick. I highly recommend your audience here, if you're first getting into the silver story, to just buy physical. Go to Kitco, go to JM Bullion, just buy the physicals. They're beautiful. They're beautiful to behold. God created silver for a reason, for money, as well as gold. There's no other reason for gold to be there other than that. Gold is gold. And also the reason, if you hear some aliens coming into onto Earth, is to mine gold, to plug. Gold has some health benefits and also to plug their ozone atmosphere to repair. So I would just say for your first time audience, get some silver. I started buying silver when it was $4, 2003, 22 years ago. I bought more silver at $15 in 2011. And now is an absolute best time to buy silver again if you had missed the boat 2 times prior. And you don't buy silver to make money. You buy silver as a store of wealth. Eventually, if the digital currency mandate was to come, you can always give a coin silver to the gas boy if you already exhausted your carbon credits, right? And so that is wealth of money. For those who are a bit more adventurous, you could buy silver mining shares like Silver Elephant. We're producing. We're micro cap. We got 100 million ounces of silver in the ground at about $14 million market cap. Some of the silver, we're in discussion with the government regarding its ownership. But nonetheless, I just say, mining company like Silver Elephant or big or small, you want to buy a little bit of both all in a basket. It comes a lot more risks. So it's not for lighthearted because silver is in the ground, need to be dug up, right? And then from the country of which is going to assess the tax or royalties. And the locals also going to try to get their fair share, shake their fair share. So it's a very different in nature. It's akin to owning a house versus buying a construction company. So there's quite a bit of nuances.
Well, John, I appreciate you taking the time to be on this. How can people learn more about you and get in touch?
Yeah, get on my. If you can learn about Silver Elephant, go to just Google Silver Elephant, or if you want to learn more about market analysis, I'm a chartered financial analyst. You can go to my Twitter, just go to X and search John Lee Silver Elephant. I do want to give a bit of my own plug that before Trump announced the ceasefire on Friday, I smelled something. I just say, hey, look, the oil market and equity market are not looking as a breakout of war, and it would be a genius move for Trump to say, hey, you guys took it out, right? You guys been talking and such animosity amongst two of you for the last 20, 30 years. You guys took it out, right? So, and then he came in and salvaged the day. I think he really earned a lot of political points, and he made everybody happy. Everybody got what they wanted, at least what they say they wanted. But whatever that came out of the product, right? You want to bake a cake doesn't mean that the cake is gonna taste good when the cake is baked. But that's not Trump's problem. It's somebody else's problem. And but on Twitter on Friday, I did talk about potential. There may not be a World War III after all, and that this ploy is gonna at least keep the warmongers at bay for a little while. They're fuming right now. They're not happy. They're exposed, and now the world is there to see who are whose camps, and I think we're gonna have a quite a peaceful world, and also China and United States are going to patch up with this new administration regime change in China. So I think we're going to enter in some glorious times ahead, and that I don't see equity correction. Like I said, a lot of the money is putting energy, and energy is going to be abundant. So I see a renaissance. Just want to make sure I keep in good health and not to be consumed by the CNBCs, CNN, and the Fox, and then step out of the world and see a little bit of the world. It is a wonderful place to be. The birds are singing, the flowers are blooming, and just take advantage and experience while you can.
Thanks so much for being on, and looking forward to having you on in the near future.
Yeah, I look forward to that too. Thank you.
Quick ask, over half of you who watch the show regularly haven't yet subscribed. If you've enjoyed the show, you're finding value in it, subscribing is really the best way to support the channel. It's, of course, free. It literally takes 2 seconds, and it lets the algorithm know that this content matters. And of course, my commitment to you is going to be that I'm going to continue to bring on great guests, refine those questions. And of course, I'm always receptive to your feedback. If there's certain people that you'd like to have on, or certain questions, or this, that, and the other that you'd like to have as part of the show going forward, things of that nature, please let me know. I'm pretty easy to access. Anyhow, that's my commitment to you. If you can subscribe, that would mean a lot. Thanks.